Hello everyone and welcome to today's Mondac webinar in association with Angie Broad Law Firm, who will be providing an introduction to the Chinese sanctions system. My name is Dan Sampaio and I'm joined by a brilliant speaker to take us through today's discussion. Nancy Ching is a partner at Angie Broad Law Firm and an expert of the International Chamber of Commerce Task Force on International Trade and State Aid. Nancy is a lawyer specializing in the automobile industry in China with a focus on corporate, M&A, capital markets, international trade and investment, dispute resolution and compliance. Nancy is the builder and founder of the legal and compliance system for Tesla Inc.'s business development in China, ensuring Tesla Inc.'s steady and rapid development in China for many years. Now, before I hand over to Nancy to begin today's webinar, a quick housekeeping item. You can submit questions to Nancy by typing them into the questions pane of the toolbar on the right-hand side of your page. And we do encourage you to send in those questions. We will also be providing Nancy's and the firm's contact information after the webinar. It's now my pleasure to hand you over to Nancy to begin. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to discuss this very interesting topic. And first of all, I would like to introduce myself. Next slide, please. My name is Nancy. I'm a lawyer. You can call me Nancy. I'm from China. I specialized in dispute resolution, compliance, international trade, and corporate. And very happy that I have been working for Tesla almost 5 years. I cooperate with very different functions, sales, delivery service, charging, and US autopilot team and US legal team. And this is a very interesting experience. And I'm also a member of SEC task force on the international and state aid. So if you have any questions, relating to this field, I'm very happy to answer that and very happy to discuss the questions with all of you. And let's start today's topic. Next slide, please. Okay. I think sanction topic is very interesting. A lot of people pay attention on this topic because a lot of corporate has a globally business. They operate the business globally. So knowing different countries and regions, compliance systems and sanction systems is very important for us because it will make us estimate the risk better and make a better decision. In some way, that will make us a better position if we involved in the fair competition world. And I try to make this section as clearly as possible. So I just summarize some frequent asked questions and I try to answer them in the simple way. So hope that you will love it. And I will separate my session into 5 parts. The first one is general framework. The second one and third one is economic, financial sections and trade sections. Next slide, please. And the last 2 should be enforcement, penalty, and as the last, I will share my experience and my thoughts about the update and tense. And at the end of the section, probably we will have the 5 to 10 minutes to answer the question if you have any. Next slide, please. Okay, let us start our session. The first part I think is very important. We will introduce the general framework of China. A lot of people ask me, what is the main regulations or laws in China relating to the PRC sanction system? I list some of them. And the most one is the first one and last 2. The first one is laws of PRC counting foreign sanctions. And the last one is the rules counting unjustified extraterritorial application of foreign legislation and other measures. And the last one is provision on the list of unreliable entities. We will discuss in more detail later on. Next slide, please. And a lot of people ask me, does the domestic legislation empower PRC government to implement an autonomous sanction regime or only those sanctions adopted by the international institute and other organizations such as United Nations, UN, European Union? The short answer is both. China has its unique domestic legislation, PRC sanction system I had mentioned before. We have the laws of countering foreign sanctions. We have laws about the unreliable lists and other regulations. But at the meantime, China will impose the sanctions commanded by other international institutes such as UN Security Council. Last year, China Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued 14 notices on the implement of Security Council sanctions, and all these notices has been published on the website of the China Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If you're interested, you can revisit the website and view all these notices. Next slide, please. And somebody asked me what kind of the sanctions imposed in China, economic, financial, trade restriction, embargo, and travel bans. As we have mentioned, that's several important laws and regulations. The PRC counter foreign sanction laws and the provision on list on unreliable entities lists. They list some type of sanctions I list here. The first one, we have some measures relating to visa, access, trade, and others. The visas, that China can refuse the issue visa, deny entry, cancel exist visa, expel the individual out of the China. And as the access, China can seize, detain, freeze property and other assets. As to the trade, China can prohibit or restrict transaction, corporate, and other activities. And other measures, yes, China government has a rights if they can take additional measures if necessary. And the law's provisions on the list of unreliable entities also establish a work mechanism that authority can have the right to impose fine. Next slide, please. And another question is, which countries are currently subject to sanction embargoes in China? I would like to say that China currently has no specific different programs up to different countries, but China, as we have mentioned, implements UN Security Council's sanction. Though under the UN Security Council sanction, there were some countries and regions are listed in this sanction program. So those countries and regions also will be implemented in China that are listed in the final paragraph. That's something including but not limited Iraq and other countries. Next slide, please. And another question is, what other sanctions regime are currently enforced in China are not country specific, such as other topic, cybersecurity, that I would like to mention that there was cybersecurity law in China that it says that prohibit foreign overseas entities that attack criminal information infrastructure of China and cause serious consequence. And the Public Security Department and the relative departments can decide take measures to freeze properties and other necessary sanction against the overseas entities. Next slide, please. And the next question, what sanctions and prohibits are imposed in China relating to terrorist activities? I would like to say that in China, there is a specific law relating to this topic. That is the countering terrorism law or PRC. Under this law, it said that prohibits any individual or entities to prepare, planning, to do the organization, planning, preparing, implement terrorist activities. If they cause a serious consequence, you will be imposed to take the criminal liability. If there's minor one and no serious offense, the public security departments will impose detention and fine. And if it involved any dangerous criminal and other dangerous tools, China has decided to implement control on their production, import, export, transport, sales, use, and restrict on trade activities. Next slide. And somebody asked me, are there any blocking anti-boycott law in place in China? I would like to say yes. As we have mentioned before, that there were some laws and regulations on these relating to this. On the January 9th, 2021, the Ministry of Commerce of China issued the rules of countering unjustified actual terrorism, application of foreign legislation, and other measures. It is in order to block the actual application of foreign laws and measures which violate the international law, basic morals of international relations, impose, prohibit, and restrict Chinese citizens, corporate, and other organizations from engaging in normal economy, trade, and other activities. And another very important law is the law I mentioned as law PRC law on the countering foreign activities that forbid any organizations and individual which enforce and insist in enforce discriminatory restriction measures taken by foreign countries against the China citizens and organizations. Another law I want to say is the China Civil Procedure Law. It's updated in 2023 and come into force on the January 1st, 2024. It said that if somebody wants to enforce the judgment which issued by the other court, the court will review the case. And if the courts believe that this judgment is violates the principle of laws of People's Republic of China or the PRC's sovereignty, security, and social public interests, the court can rule not to recognize it and enforce it. Next slide, please. And some other questions is who should comply with sanctions imposed in China? And do sanctions have actual territorial effect? This is a very interesting topic. And I would like to say that any entities and individuals in China should comply strictly with the PRC sanction law. And there will no specific law to regulate if the sanctions have actual territorial effect. But I would like to say that there are some laws and regulations in place and not exclude actual territorial effect. For example, we have mentioned before that there is a China cybersecurity law. It says that foreign entities should not attack the critical information infrastructure of China and cause the serious consequence. If that the public security department can impose to freeze property and impose sanction if necessary. And I think that is implies that probably foreign entities may be liable, and if they violate the sanction laws will be imposed sanctions if necessary. And in the future, probably there are lots of implementary rules and regulations will publish, and a lot of cases will be published. And all those updates probably will give the more specific regulations and more clearly if the sanctions have the actual territory effects. And the next question is, which government authority in China are responsible for implementary and administrative sanctions? Unlike other countries' authorities, such as United States, probably one sole authority applies and administrating all the sanctions. But in China, there are some departments and authorities implement different sanctions. I'll list some of them. The first one is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is responsible for the overall coordinate and implement of China's foreign policies, including sanctions, and the determine suspension, modification of canceling of the list of countermeasures and countermeasures should be announced by orders issued by the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs and other relative department of State Council. Next slide. And other department authority would be relating to the managing other sanctions. The Ministry of the Commerce is involved in the administration, trade, and economy section. And as we have mentioned before, the Public Security Department will managing something like cyber security issues. Next slide, please. And last two questions about Section 1 is a business in China requires put in place a system of control in order to ensure compliance with section. If no such as system of control are required by law, what are the advice in practice? Oh, this is a very interesting topic. I think currently, there is no specific law to say that individual or entities in China should set up a system of control mechanism to control that all the activities should be compliant with the PRC sanction system. But I would like to say that to minimize those risks, I highly recommended every individual and entities, if they pay attention on these risks, should take some tips and to minimize such risks. Firstly, I would like to say that we should pay attention to the PRC sanction system and any updates and cases. Those updates and cases and regulations make us know about the main legal requirements relating to sanctions. And then we should establish a scheme mechanism to check if any partner or other party have involved in sensitive activities probably will bring risks. And then I think we should set up the policies and procedures to make sure the entities always estimated those risks and make a better decision if involved in cases or when we operate a business relating to some issues. And next, I think we should add some sanction clauses in the contract. That makes sure to minimize the risks. And the part 2 is economy and financial sanctions. Next slide, please. And some question about the access freedom. In what circumstances may a person become subject to access freedom provision in China, and what dealing to access free position generally restricted in China? To answer this question, I think uh, we should pay attention three parts. The first one is what kind of the sanctions the government can take relating to sexual freeze. I would like to say that China can take, seize, detain, freeze movable property, immovable property, and other type of property within China against the individual and organization if they violate the PRC sanction law. And what kind of behavior the law against that individual and organization of content list according to law of the Republic in China that they prohibit individual and entities that directly and indirectly participate in the formulation, decision on implementation of these criminal restriction measures. And I want to say that not only those individuals and organizations could be imposed the sanctions, but others also probably face the risk to be imposed sanctions. At least the last paragraph, that those spouse and nearest relative of the individual and the senior executive of the entity, and if the organization hire those individuals as a senior executive, and the organization which is established and operation by the individual and the organizations listed in the under countermeasures list would be face the same risk to be imposed sanctions. Next slide. And next question is, are there any general carve-outs and exceptions to the access freedom provision in China? Currently, there is no specific laws and regulations to discuss about general carve-out and exceptions to access fees, but other regulations, such as I mentioned civil procedure law, there are some regulations to say that if somebody apply to executive judgment, for example, to assess the freeze assess, but if those assess is necessary for living or the imposed education or something like that, you can apply for the explication. And if the courts agree, this can be a caveat. Next slide. And the next question is, do the competent sanction authority in China maintain a list of individual and entities blocked under the access freeze restriction? Currently, no. China doesn't have a public, accessible, centralized list of individual and entities subject to access freedom restriction, similar like SDN list maintained by the US or FAC. On the contrary, China authority always decide and order to issue some orders to list somebody or some entities to impose some sanctions and list somebody in the countermeasures, and these orders will be published in the website of the authorities. And there were some cases, and we will discuss later. And as I mentioned, that's in the final part of the slides. On the December 23rd, 2022, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China decided to freeze properties against Yu Maochun and Ta and others. Next slide, please. And other some questions. What other restrictions apply under the economic and financial sanctions regime in China? Currently, there is no such kind of program relating to the sectoral section, but in the future, Probably yes, we will keep an eye on that. And next questions, license. Are there are the competent sanction authority in China empowered to issue license to permit activities which would otherwise violate economy financial section? If so, what kind of extent of their license power and in which circumstance will they issue the license? Currently, there is no such license application process, but some authorities have the have the power to make the final decision. And if the authority finds the basis are changed, the authority can suspend and modify and cancel the relative countermeasures. And next question, what is application process of license and what's the timeline? Currently, there is no regulations to regulate the general process of the license and the typical timeline. Next slide, please. And the third part, we will talk about the trade sanction. Next slide, please. And the general restrictions. Question somebody asked me, what restriction applies in relating to trade, import, export, and of the good technology and service? Generally speaking, China implements a unified export control system that's managing through the formulating of the control list and categories and the implementation of the export license. And those just control those dual-use item, military products, nuclear, and other goods, technology, and service. And those items generally relating to maintenance national securities and interest and fulfill the international obligations. If we are involved in the export such kind of items, we should do the filing and submit all the documents required and get the consent and approval from the government. If we got the approval, we can export such kind of item. Next, please. Next slide, please. And what restriction apply in the relating to trade, whether import, export, and other goods and technology service? And also I have mentioned that other regulations such as the provisions on the list of unreliable entities established a work mechanism for the list unreliable entities. It clearly states that foreign entities, if they danger China's national sovereignty, security, and development interests, and violate normal market trading principles, interrupt normal transaction with the China's entities, and the government they take the discriminal measures against the China entities and other individuals, serious damage legislation rights and the interests of China entities and other organizations. They will be included in the list of unreliable entities. And once listed in the list, the China's authority can restrict the import, export, can restrict or prohibit investment, and can prohibit and restrict entering some related personnel and transportation vehicle, and also can restrict and cancel the work permit, and can impose fine if necessary and other measures. Next slide, please. And next question is, do any exceptions apply to general trade restrictions? I would like to say that As to the exports control law, yes, if the entity has a good control system and operates well, the government will issue the general approval for export. And next question, targeted restriction. Have any authorities in China imposed or trade sanctions against dealing with any particular individual and entities? Yes, we have listed some cases, and I will talk about this. And I show some cases here. On the December 23rd, 2022, the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs of China and decided to take anti-sanction measures against Yu Maochun Todd and other individuals, and the sanction is freeze property, not only the movable but also the immovable and other type of property. And the number two, prohibit organizations and individuals engaging in related transaction. And third, no visa issue and deny the entry in China, not only for the individual, but also for their immediate family members. Next slide, please. And on the April 7th, 2023, and laws, according to the laws, People Republic of countering foreign sanctions, China decided to take following countermeasure against the Hoodstein Institute and the Region Library and their leaders, and institute the government to prohibit their transaction, exchange, and corporate activities. And for those leaders, the China's authority imposed the sanctions like the freeze property and prohibit related transactions, corporate and other activities, and no visa issue, and not allowed to entry in China. On the April 13th, 2023, the China authority imposed a sanction against Michael and also freeze their property, prohibit transaction, and no visa issue, do not allow entering in China, not only the individual, but their immediate family members. Next slide, please. And on the February 16, 2023, China authority also imposed a sanction against Lockheed Martin Corporate and the Raytheon Missile Defense because they participate in the military sales to Taiwan, and the sanction include the prohibit import and export, prohibit new investment, prohibit entering of the senior manager personnel, and not allowed and canceling work permits, and also fine twice as much as the amount of the contract. Next slide, please. And the next question is, in what circumstance may be competent sanction authority in China issue a license to trade in goods, in technology, and products that are subject to restriction? Generally speaking, as to the export control, the authority will review all the application documents, and they will consider if they will give the permit. The factors they will consider is national security interests, international obligations and commitments, the type of export, the sensitivity of the control item, the country or the region of destination of export, end user and end use, related record, credit record, and other factors. And addition, as to the sanction, trade sanction law in China currently has no specific regulations about the permit or license. However, the authority can set up a deadline, correct deadline for some individuals. If the foreign entities can correct their activities during the designated period, probably these foreign entities can argue that and apply for the remove from the unreliable lists. Next slide. And last, some questions. What is the application process for a license? What is typical timeline for the license to grant it? I would like to say that, again, there was no specific laws and regulations to regulate the general process for license and timeline. But I want to say that according to the provision on the list of unreliable entities, the foreign entity is concerned is restrict and prohibit from engaging in the import or export activities relating to China. The China entities, if they want, it's necessary and need to conduct this transaction, the Chinese entities could report to the authority, and the authority will review, probably will approve such a transaction. And next question, to what extent is it possible to engage in the competent sanction authority to discuss license application querying on the trade sanctions? I would like to say that according to the provision on the list of unreliable entities, the work mechanism shall decide whether or not to investigate the act of foreign entities, and during the investment period, the foreign entity can make a statement and defend itself, and the authority will consider it and then make the final decision. And next slide, please.
如果你希望能用另一种语言和我交谈，可以在 Siri 设置中改变我能听懂和使用的语言。
And next part, I would like to talk about enforcement and penalty. Next slide, please. The question is there any requirement to report violence to the authority, either self-report or report others? If report is not obligation, it's encouraged in any event. I would like to say that there was no laws to say that individual and the entities must self-report or report when there was a violation of sanctions of the to the authority. But there were some regulations relating to this, and I think we can probably think that it can seem as a form of implicit encourage to report violation of sanction. As I have mentioned before, that national security law, that it says that citizens and organizations should fulfill their obligation to maintain national security and need to timely report if there are any crew that's endanger national security activities. Next slide, please. And other regulations, such as the laws of countering unjustified actual territorial application of foreign legislation and other measures. That it says that Chinese entity should truthfully report related situation if within 30 days if they encounter situation that foreign laws and measures prohibit and restrict their normal sales activities, and the government will consider if they will issue a junction. And next slide, please. And the last, according to the provision of list of unreliable entity, the working mechanism shall decide whether or not investigate the act of the foreign entities, not only according to function and power, but also probably will depend on the suggestion and report from the relative parties. Next slide, please. And some other questions. Which authorities are responsible for investigation sanction violence? What is the extent of their investigative power? I would like to say that, as I mentioned before, there was many authorities have the right to impose different sanctions. So these authorities probably have the investment power, but there is no sole authorities that's managing all the investment rights. Next, penalty. What are the potential penalties for violation of sanctions? Answer this question, I would like to mention the two penalties. First one is administration penalties. It's generally imposed by the government agency. As we have discussed before, probably will restrict trade, restrict some export, import, or give fine, or no visa, not denied entering in PRC. But it doesn't mean that there is no criminal liability here. If you're involved in some serious crime, such as endanger China's security, probably you will be face a risk to take the criminal liability. Next slide, please. And the next question is, have there been significant recent enforcement cases, and what lessons we have learned from those cases? And I have mentioned that some cases as before, such as against Yu Maochun. And next slide, please. And against Hudson Institute and Reagan Library and Michael, and these cases that we have discussed before. And if there are any lesson we could learn from is, I would like to say that as we have mentioned before, we should pay attention to the PRC sanction system and pay attention to any updates and new cases. From this, we can learn what the main legal requirements and we can analyze the risks, and highly recommended to set up the policy, procedural, and decision maker procedural, and to analyze the risks all the time and insert some protective clauses in the clause, and to always pay attention on these requirements can minimize the risks. And remember that not only we should pay attention if the government published some orders to mention somebody or entities, and don't please follow and fulfill these legal requirements, and then remember that not only those individual and activities listed in the unreliable list could be faced the imposed the sanction, but others, the family members and high senior executive officer, probably also relating to this organization, probably also face the same risks. And so pay attention to all these cases and regulations. This is my recommendation. Next slide, please. Yes, next slide, please. Okay, and last part is updates and trends. Yes, I would like to share, have already shared some experience and my understanding about this. Currently, China don't have many laws and regulations relating to PRC sanction, but in the future, probably the different departments of different functions of the state council and other authority would probably will publish a series of implement rules, and those rules probably will clarify some license process or other unclear issues. So please pay attention on those updates and changes. And in addition, currently there is no many cases as published by the administration authority as well as a judicial authority. But in the future, I'm sure there will more and more cases will pump up, and we should pay attention on this case, and we can help us to analyze the risks. And during our operating the business, we should pay attention to all these issues. It's very important, probably will influence our business, and especially those high executive officer probably have some risks. So please pay attention on these risks and legal requirements. Okay, next slide. Next. So on the final page, I list my mobile phone number and my email address. If you have any questions, and you can send me email, and I'm very happy to answer the question, and very happy to discuss with all of you. And thank you for your time and attention. And on the end of the section, probably I can answer some questions. Yes, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Nancy. As Nancy mentioned, we will be moving on to our Q&A section now. So if you do have a question, please do send it in and we'll have it answered for you. Before we move on to that, though, Nancy, I just wanted to say thank you very much for your insights there and your presentation. Incredibly informative. You were able to get through a lot of information there in a short space of time. So I'm sure that there will be questions from our audience that you'll be able to answer. The first question that I wanted to ask you, would the compliance with foreign export control violate the anti-foreign sanctions law of the PRC or the AFS law?
Okay, thanks for your question. And this is very interesting questions. I would like to say that a lot of multinational companies would like to comply some foreign laws, sanction laws especially, and they always complies with export control regulations. And in those regulations, probably there were some regulations ask some restriction, especially to some Chinese entities and Chinese individual against the Chinese, and probably these to follow and compliance with these foreign actual control regulation probably would be deemed as discriminatory restriction measures from the foreign countries. And if the China's authority believe that, probably it will be face the risk of a violate anti-foreign sanction laws or PRC. So my recommendation, as I have mentioned before, is to pay attention on the Chinese PRC sanction system and pay attention to those legal requirements, pay attention on those updates and changes and cases, and to review all the compliance, corporate compliance policies, and to review to check if there are any conflicts policies and to make sure to minimize the risks. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Nancy. The second question we have, do Chinese sanctions laws apply to a company registered in Kazakhstan where one of the shareholders are a Chinese company?
Okay, thanks for your question. This is a very interesting and a very good question. As we have discussed before, that currently China's government would like the entities and individuals in China strictly complies PRC sanction laws. So if you are in China, probably you should comply with PRC sanction laws. But for those foreign entities, I would like to say that you should consider some factors. First, do you have any business relating to China? And then, do you have any companies set up or investment in China? And then I would like to say that some specific laws, as we have discussed before, that probably have the actual terror effect. That is means we have mentioned before under the cybersecurity law, the public security department have the right to determine and investigate if any foreign entities attacked the China's critical information infrastructure of China and caused a serious consequence. And if involved in this activity, probably those foreign companies probably will face the risks of imposed sanction and probably take some liability.
Brilliant.
Yeah, this is my answer.
Thank you very much, Nancy. We have another question that has come in from the audience. Doesn't business partner screening conflict with Chinese data privacy laws?
Uh,
And I'll give you the opportunity to read that, Nancy. And just whilst you're looking at that question, it's a second question on that toolbar. If you do have a question for Nancy, please do send it in, and you can see Nancy's contact information there as well. So please do jot that down if you want to use that QR code as well. Please take a note of that, and you can get in contact.
Okay, I got it. I think it's very interesting topic. Let us talk about some China data privacy laws. I think it's very interesting that under China data privacy laws, we will treat different data. We have different regulations on this, so we should separate which kind of data we have. For example, there were some customer data. And when we're dealing with the customer's data, we should give the consent from the other side. For example, if I reach a contract with the customer, if I want to know who it is and how to contact it, such a telephone number, we should get the consent from the customer. that if customer allowed us to connect and use this data, we can use it. So firstly, and second requirement is there any necessary for us to connect and use this data? So probably the name of the customer probably is necessary because we should know which part we should dealing with and sell the goods to who. And the telephone number probably is necessary if we want to connect with this person, and we should deliver the goods to him and must use this contact information. So to make sure that you contact the right data and the necessary for the aim of the contract, and then we should pay attention that you should disclose the aim why you connect this data and use this data. So if you uh, tell the customer that we will use your data to analyze the sanction risks, and the customer know that and give you consent, yes, you complied with China data privacy laws, generally speaking, but in some circumstances, probably they have another obligations. It's a very complex issue. But I want to say that generally speaking, you comply with China data privacy laws. And if you don't have the consent, probably you will violate the China data privacy laws. And if you did not disclose the aim and use the data in the different aim, probably you also violate the China data privacy law. This is my answer. Thank you.
I think you've answered that very well, Nancy. Just looking at the time, I think that we'll have time for one more question and then perhaps some comments from yourself to finish. So I will ask this question. Are commitment letters of sanction compliance or sanction compliance and liability exemption clauses still valid? And that question, I believe, we had come through before the session, Nancy, so it's not in our
Okay.
toolbar. Ask again if you like.
Secondly, in which case persons who are not Chinese citizen may be held responsible for breach Chinese section laws? Is that question?
I'll read it again, sorry. Are commitment letters of sanction compliance or sanction compliance and liability exemption clauses still valid?
Oh, you mentioned, oh, okay. Okay. Thank you for your questions. I think it's very interesting and good questions. Yes, and generally speaking, a lot of companies would have the um, oh, yes, yes. A lot of companies will insert a clause in the contract to say that the party should guarantee that all the activities should comply with country foreign country section laws. Once they will uh, violate, the party has the right to terminate the contract and we are not liable for the uh, terminate the contract, and or ask the parties to issue the confirmation letter and to minimize the risk. But in China, there was a laws we have mentioned before that's forbidden any individual and entities to insert in to implement or assist to implement these criminal restriction measures. And there was China law in contract law to say that if any terms or clause violates Chinese law may be valid. So these laws probably will make these clauses become invalid. So we should review all the clauses to make sure those clauses be modified and updated to make sure that the risk is minimized and the causes is valid. Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I can see that we've had a few questions come in. Unfortunately, today we won't have time to answer those, but they will be sent on to Nancy along with your contact information, and we'll be in touch. But once again, we do encourage you to get in touch with Nancy to have your questions answered. She'll be very happy to respond. So Nancy, looking at the time, I think that we will end today. From my perspective, I want to say thank you very much for your time, for your expertise. It was an absolute pleasure spending an hour with you today. I will hand the floor over to you to say goodbye to our audience and for any closing comments.
Very happy to meet you all, and thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Nancy. Goodbye, everyone.